was set up 44. Why was the session at 48k?
It just a lot of people do it.
That just means you've got to go through a sample rate. Everything's coming out at 44.
I know. Do you know what? Because here's my argument: when people do 192 and 96, and I say, and they give me the yell, "You're doing it at 48." I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's half of 192, or a quarter of 192, isn't it? And half of 96. So surely, if I then have to do a sample rate conversion, it's better to just do the maths divided by 2.
Well, I mean, my point of view on that is just that you've got to go through a sample rate conversion.
Yeah.
And that's never a good idea unless you have to. But it depends how you do that as well.
Yes.
A lot of people just rush that through whatever software they've got. We've tested about half a dozen different ways of doing sample rate conversions now, so we kind of got different methods of doing it.
Yeah. So do you play out of this to go analog? So would that be, because this is an important thing, it's like I've delivered at 48k. So how would you take care of that? Would you be playing out through your very high quality D2As to get it to analog to go through your analog chain, or will you just do your stuff and not worry about that and maybe sample rate convert it on the fly? Or
it's more than likely going analog.
Right.
It's pretty rare that doing in the box master.
Yeah.
It does happen though these days.
So is that a good way to get it now? I've done it at 48. I've had my hand slapped.
Like, well, no, it's not exactly a problem. It's just it just seemed an odd sample rate to choose, unless it was specifically for video or something like that, obviously. But I'd say if everything's going to be delivered at 44 or even possibly 96 these days, so obviously HD videos are all 96. So again, it kind of makes sense to do it at 96. But I keep getting told by mix guys that pushes hard drives to the limits and that kind of thing. Yeah. So that seems to be the reason that most people aren't doing that. But it seems a lot of guys have a separate rig these days, though, don't they? And capture off the back of the board at 96, but most of the source is probably at 44.
Yeah.
Well, the board's probably generating enough stuff above to make it worthwhile.
Yeah,
still,
definitely.
Personally, I master it at the sample rate it comes in at.
Right.
So I'll just keep it at 48k right through, and then I'll make a sample rate conversion at the end.
Right.
Stuart, who works in this room as well, we have a separate computer here. He generally likes to play it out at its native sample rate and then capture at 44 on the second machine. Yeah. But then that leaves you with the problem of what happens when the client comes back and says, well, I want the high-res one now.
Right, yeah.
You haven't got it, it doesn't exist.
Okay.
So I prefer to have keep it at the format it comes in at and then get it to the deliverable format after that.
Right.
But then it's like, say, we've done days worth of experiments on sample rate converters. Try it this way, try it this way, try it this way, try it this way. Now listen to them all and see which one actually works. Because it all just comes down to listening tests at the end. You've just got to do multiple different ways of doing it and then sit and listen to it and find, I prefer that one. There we go. And I don't think enough people do that, to be honest.
I was going to say that's something that's really interesting. I work with a very, very big name producer who gets a lot of flack for certain aspects of his working process. But one thing that he did was they call it the Coke taste test. And you were playing 3 things and he'd get it right each time, blind test, and he'd get it right 2 weeks later. Yeah. And there weren't big differences, but he listened, and you could never take away from him the fact that was what he was doing. And not enough people actually have the sort of the courage to say, I can't tell a difference, or I really believe in that, and I can't tell you why, but I like that.
I think more often not, people just won't do the listening.
Yes, exactly.
They'll read a magazine article and say, I need this piece of gear.
Yeah.
I mean, the one that we found surprising was the number of mix engineers these days who seem to have those Lavery Gold converters.
Yes.
So we got one on hire. Like, okay, loads of people are getting these. Let's have a listen to it. Let's see what it's about. So not this room, the sister room across the hallway. There was a guy in there who was mastering some. It was kind of acoustic world music, so it was pretty good for doing a converter test with. Actually, captured it through the AD2 as it was set up, and then we just output what was going into the AD2 into the Lavery, captured the same thing again. There was 3 of us in the room. We all kind of looked at each other and said, "Should we put it back in the box then?" Just weren't interested because it just didn't sound as good as the AD2, and I don't believe that enough people who are buying a £6,000 converter have actually got into a position where they can listen to them, or at least gone to places that have got them, put a file through it so that you can hear what it does. Yeah. Because obviously, especially the Prism ones are getting hard to come by now. But with any of these, most companies, if you're in a studio, they'll send you out a demo unit. try it out.
Yeah.
And I just don't think people are doing that a lot of the time.
No, I think
which is
that's
why
right.
we were. It was more a case of, are we sure that we're supposed to be still using the prisms?
Yes.
So we got the library, we had to listen to it, and we all sort of came to the conclusion, yeah, we're glad we're still using the
Yeah,
prism, basically.
absolutely.
But it's just about making sure. When you see an awful lot of people using another piece of equipment, you think, well, why? What's the deal?
No, there is an Emperor's New Clothes thing that goes on. It's amazing.
What are those other ones? I can't remember what it's called now. The converter that's really, really coloured. I forget what it's called though now.
Apogee.
No, new one. Not. It's only been around for I think the last couple of years or so.
Oh, there's a few, aren't there?
It's only like a few letters. I can't remember. There seems to be loads of people raving about them. They're very polarising. I've heard people absolutely swear by them, say they absolutely love them. Other people say they
I
can't
like that
touch
with
them.
monitors as well. You know, everybody's into the all the Amphions. It's like I know I've
got
heard
some
two
in.
pairs, and I'm like, ooh, those are great. Those weren't. You know, but there's this general Amphions of
A lot
the.
of people seem to be going to them. We had a set sent in. I don't even know. I can't remember them all. The big ones anyway. It's
Yeah.
like a big tower thing. Not very big, about that wide maybe,
Yeah.
but about that tall. And they just sounded kind of flat and boxy to us, to be honest. They didn't really have any life to them. They just seemed a bit disappointing.
Yeah.
We got those ones recently. They're not bad. The PSIs.
Yes. Yeah. I've seen those in a few places.
A few
I haven't
pla-
heard them.
Yeah, with the guy. What's his name? Nicholas Boostin. I don't know how you pronounce his surname, to be honest. French guy, the third floor management thing. They seem to be ringing an awful lot of work between France and the UK at the moment. He was based here for a while. Now he just seems to float around the London studios. He's something to do with them, and he just seems to be getting them in as many places as he can at the moment and doing it quite successfully.
Brilliant.
But they're not bad, actually.
Yeah. That's a useful reference, isn't it? I mean, you know your PMCs, but a lot of people are listening on a small.
Well, yeah. I mean, it depends. I mean, I think most of the engineers do most of the work on the bigs.
Yeah.
I think Tim does quite a lot of work on his smalls. He's got some B&Ws, so it's his smalls. Most of the guys do most of the work on the bigs. So I tend to go to the smalls to just make sure the bass is right.
Yes.
And say make sure I've not just piled in a load of bass that no one's ever going to hear.
Yeah.
Because you can pile in so much bass in the like the 40, 30 hertz region on these, and it just sounds great. And you think, oh, this is fantastic. And you go to the little ones, you just got nothing.
Well, that's what I was saying about the James Guthrie thing with the Floyd and Roger Waters stuff. Is it's just like, wow, he just gets that so right. It just it's all the way down. It's correct. And yeah, I do struggle. I struggle because I mix a lot on small speakers, and I feel it's good, and that's why it's nice to come to get something mastered, because I feel it punches. It's got the weight in it, but it's the build up of the box itself that does it. So it's trying to learn how to get that to translate onto the bigger systems. And I still haven't done it, and struggle terribly.
That's the knack of the guys who get paid £1 million to mix an album, isn't it? Unfortunately.
Well, they just don't put any low end in.
It's weird watching Chenzo work, going back to him earlier, because he does all his mixing on that little radio, essentially, doesn't he? And he kind of goes up to the bigs for half an hour to make sure the bass is right, and that's about it. You think, so you just, but when you think about it, it kind of makes sense. He's mixing, essentially, on what people are going to be listening to.
Well, I've got some old Oratones, and I use those, which are brilliant.
The traditional grot box.
Yes. Yeah. And I've got a crop box, and I'm like, it's going to die one day, and I'll never get another one.
No.
So I found some old Oratones, and they're fantastic. But it's just finding that thing that I guess it takes you out of in the middle of the mixing space and just allows you to go, actually, I need to listen and just see whether anything's really sticking out that's not meant to. But there's no bass on those. Well, there is bass.
Well, yeah, there's almost not meant to be though. No. That's the point. Yeah, that's what they're there for.
Yeah.
Well, again, that's why these can be useful.
Yes.
But I think it's about 16 or 17 hertz that kind of rule a flat down to the point in the surround rooms. There's no sub.
Right.
Because you just don't need one. These go lower than most subs go,
Yes.
so you just don't need a sub in that situation. It's just going to complicate matters in the room, if nothing else.
I'm putting off the inevitable. I'm trying to keep talking, and you're
running out of tape.
You're feeding back. I can hear an echo.
My daughter.
What are you expecting to be wrong with it?
The floor tones and the kick drum. There's a couple of points where it just blows out, I think. But maybe not.
I was actually, the kick doesn't sound alright. The kick doesn't sound too bad.
Doesn't sound alright.
No, it doesn't sound too bad. It goes the wrong way around. It's not like it's flapping all over the place and got massive low end that shouldn't be there. Is it? So. cut this, we can do this as a vinyl master essentially, rather than something to CD.
Okay.
Those hi-hats have to go essentially. Again, I don't know how much you know about how a cut works, but you cut through an EQ curve,
Yes.
which is a pretty extreme EQ
Yes.
curve.
Yeah.
You're 20 dB up at the top end at 20k, so the top end has to be massively controlled
Sure.
with DS really heavily going to a lathe,
Yeah.
because they just distort.
Yeah.
The lathe will cut it perfectly, but no pickup stylus will
No.
ever be able to track it because it's just far too much movement going on.
Right.
So things like the front end of those hi-hats is just basically gotta go. It's just not gonna work.
It's sort of in the they're in the overheads. They're a nightmare to get rid of.
So I've got the best DSer in the world. Wait till you hear this. Oh, sorry, I need to patch it in. It's using the amp on this one.
Actually, those toms
They're not out of place. It's got a bass heavy, but it's not. There's nothing that's particularly out of place in it. Literally the fastest DSer in the world.
That gets quite a lot of use on my mixes.
Oh, that's not just the standard Masterleg one either.
Oh, is it not?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's got the logo. all our Masterleg gears got the logo. It's all custom gear. Like we had a guy bring in. This is the Mark 1 of the EQ, our custom version though. We had an engineer start working here. He brought in his own Mark 2 version. Oh, I want this one in. I want this one in instead. So we put them both on the desk. Put the same EQ on both of them. Flip between them. No contest.
So has he bought that now?
Oh
Do you
yeah,
not
well
sell
no,
them?
the Mark 2's just gone. Yeah, he's got to just come back to using that. It was like the Mark 2 just sounded like putting a cloth in front of the speaker compared to that one. And it's not like we weren't working. It's like putting a couple of dB here or there, something like that, just to make sure it's doing something. But that is, you can't hear it
No.
ever. Yeah, there we go. That's kind of better. The front end has just gone on the hi-hats now. Still going to have to sort of bring in the top end though.
Yeah.
There's 4 of them in the world. We've got them all.
Is that to do with the vinyl?
No, it is helpful in those situations, but it's basically that's just high and low cut filters, elliptical equalizer for the mono in the bass end, stereo width, and that's probably the best stereo width program you're going to get anywhere on any piece of gear, and then just MS balance controls. I've had people offer us thousands and thousands of pounds for those when they've come in. He said, I just want that. So the other thing that obviously key for the vinyl aspect is I'm not going to go loud.
No.
So I'm setting the EQ here for 0 being a +3, which is a kind of a good level for a 7-inch single, 12-inch single, that kind of thing. But we are going to need to get it up a little bit. Same one as everyone else in the world's using these days.
Their stuff is really good.
Oh, it's brilliant. It's the most transparent.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Not all the time, but most of the time.
So in terms of what I've given you there as a with the amount of headroom, I mean, as I say, this was a quick.
No, that's fine. Yeah,
So
that's fine.
leaving your headroom's good.
Yes, leaving not hitting 0 is good,
Yeah.
but you get some people who they've basically done their mix normally and then just turn into compressors and limiters and whatever, and then turn it down by 3 dB, so you've got a sausage with 3 dB of headroom.
Yeah.
That's pointless.
Well, I've tickled a master bus compressor.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
So that's good. Yeah.
Basically, the only thing we generally ask is just take the limiter off it.
Yes.
A lot of people mix into a limiter.
Yeah.
Fine, no problem. A lot of people will slap just an L2 or a fab across it for the client, so you can hear the loud version of it. But yeah, just take that off for us.
Yeah.
Essentially. But beyond that, no. I mean, level-wise, that's bang on.
Right.
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I use. I don't know what you feel like. I tend to try and keep on the Bobcats, the K14 thing.
Oh right,
there's
no,
like
I've never used that.
Okay, it's
I know
got a
I've read
setting
about
14
it. Yeah.
dB of headroom, which I kind of just think
is that kind of working like an RMS level?
It's sort of like that.
So
yeah.
more closer to VU essentially then.
Yeah, well, it gives you a point where you're kind of going into amber. Pro Tools now have adopted it on their metering, which is great.
Yeah.
You can set 12 dB or 18 dB or whatever. But yeah, so it kind of gives you an RMS sort of visual, but also you still get your peaks, so you know you're not.
It's more VU related, isn't
Yeah.
it? So it's a bit, it's a
I'm
bit.
a big believer in VUs. 'Cause
I live on them.
Yeah.
I don't. None of the other meters are of any use.
No,
essentially,
that's
the VU is
me,
the only
yeah.
one that's really useful.
Well, that's because when I'm mixing across an album, that's my sort of my point is that if the averages are kind of all around the same, then I know I'm giving you
Yeah, exactly.
something better.
And we generally do the same thing.
Right.
We'll decide on the level that we want to be achieving, and then work to that level.
Right.
And hence this dial, it's just a pad that just
Oh, okay.
goes round from 1 to 12. So you can send. I've now gone for 3 because that's kind of where I want to go for the.
So you know where you want to be
for a 10 or 12 inch or something like
Right.
that. That's about right. But if I was doing a sort of normal commercial CD release, I'd probably be going for about +8. If you're going for big dancey stuff, maybe 10, possibly even louder.
Yeah.
Stu, who works in this room, he'll go to 12 sometimes.
So if you were doing
it's
this,
intense.
so if you took this particular master version, which sounds great when you're done with it,
Yeah.
when you're done, would you suggest to a client that hasn't got a massive budget, if they want to put the CD version out or digital version out, would you just take that up in level with limit, or would you
Probably not, because of
squash it a bit more?
purely because of the way this, because I'm doing this, like I say, specifically for vinyl, so the filtering, if nothing else,
Right.
you wouldn't want an 18K roll off on a
Right.
CD, really.
I can't hear above that. Anyway. No.
You'd be amazed.
I hope so.
Shaking his head.
You're talking about me, aren't you? You're feeding back there. I can hear this echo. I'm like, I thought the acoustics in the room were fucked. I was like, it's really bright in
Definitely
Bit
not.
of a flutter.
Definitely not.
here. No.
Yeah, so I mean, to be honest, it might come down from 18 as well. I mean, I'd normally, if it's coming from a digital source and I'm EQing it in the computer to go to the lathe, I'm tending to roll off at 14 or 15 more often than not, because there's no point in trying to get that stuff on
No.
disc. It's just going to sound crap.
Yeah.
On most playback, anyway.
Yeah.
If someone's got a £5,000 turntable, then I can cut a great sounding record. Yeah.
Because it's like digital playback systems have exactly like we touched on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. It's all about the way that you can provide anything to anybody that sounds fantastic, but you've got to be mindful of that the playback systems may not be able to decode it or play them
totally.
back and-
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest advantages going back to the vinyl is that we've got here over, say, sending it to a pressing plant to be cut, is our digital chain, because obviously all these things are coming from digital files these days. It's really rare that anyone's coming in with tape anymore. It happens, but it's rare. So if you're coming in with a digital file, half of the job of cutting that is getting that digital into the analog domain the best way you can. We've got the Prism DA2s, they're about £6,000. I'll de-jitter the signal on the way through as well, through another £6,000 piece of equipment, that kind of thing. We've got the facility here to make to get the digital into the audio, into the analog domain, the best we can. And then that obviously goes through onto the lathe.
Yeah.
You're going to benefit from our better converters when you're playing it back at home, because that's what you're listening through. Whereas if you sent it to like the pressing plants more often than not, you're going through some pretty cheap converters. So just the sound that you're trying to cut isn't as good.
Yeah.
And then if your lathe also isn't as good, then you're compromising it again. But that's another one. But in terms of this, though, you probably wouldn't want to release this as a CD one, because people will just think it sounds a bit odd.
Right.
And that's not to say I like mastering bright. Because I do so much vinyl, I don't really master very bright these days.
No.
I don't think
It's
it doesn't
tiring.
sound classy.
It's just tiring.
It doesn't sound very good.
No.
Loud,
I've
bright sounds cheap almost.
It does, and I've found that the more I listen to, because people often question me when I do talks, it's like, why don't you list these people as your favourite mix engineers, producers, and all this? And I'm like, well, I go back to their stuff a lot, and I find it's from a while back. It's like Clear Mountain stuff. Great mixes.
His mixes are still great.
They're great, and you know what? When you listen to them, they sound full because you've had to turn them up because they weren't hammered. And I mean, dear Chris Lord Algie's mixes, just they're radio, they're punchy, but they're so tiring. And I think that's the thing. I think the low end tends to just have a bit more of a chance to breathe when it's not limited to
both extremes.
Yes.
When you've limited it to fuck, you've lost, like you say, you've lost all the extremes. You've lost the air at the top end, and it just all turns to mush and
which means that when
collapses in on itself.
Even though you're bringing down the high end, it's still got some space in there.
Exactly.
Because I'm an old fart. I like reverb, so I've got space in the mix
so that you can hear the reverb tails.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, it's interesting.
Nice. Yeah, you definitely wouldn't put this out on CD though.
No.
but like you say, it's got a bit more. So trying to keep the body of the hi-hats there, but at the same time taking, like you say, the extreme top and that sharp front end off them, because it's just not going to cut well. Yeah. So that's your source.
Yeah. Yeah.
Get the audience soon. I mean, if this was part of an album, this would be an issue to cut because of the amount of bass that's in it. I'd start having to cut. If it was a long side as well, I'd probably have to start carving bass out. But to just do this as a single 12-inch, as a 12-inch single, something like that, leave it.
Yeah.
But don't need to. But again, that comes down to what you're doing. If when you're cutting an album, you've got to be a lot more careful with how much bass you're leaving in, how much top end you're leaving in. When you're doing it 45 on a 12-inch, you've got a lot more wiggle room. So.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately we had a budget. The Black Sabbath album was done as a single album. It was it was 8 songs on a double album, so there were 2 songs per side of vinyl.
It was a double 45.
It was, I think it was 33.
Oh really?
I can't remember.
Because we're doing quite a lot in that of that kind of length now. That if it's bordering on a double LP, we'll advise doing it as a double 45 rather than a single 33 a lot of the time. We've had a couple of them come out like that now. I think Stu's done the last 2 Ed Sheeran albums like that as double 45s instead. Makes a difference.
It does,
because you just got so much more top end at 45 than 33, and the distortion is so much lower.
So in terms of the amount of bass in that, would that become a problem for you as a CD thing? As a what you're hearing now, is there too much low end in there that you would talk to me and say...
No, not like that. But from a personal perspective, I'd probably be taking a little bit of it out.
Right. Okay.
No, it's not to the point where I think, you need to do something about that. Because there's nothing wrong with it. I just think there's a bit too much of it. That's all it comes down to.
That's I like Pink Floyd. No, and it's genre red a bit as well.
Well, yes, exactly. It is a big, thick, heavy metal sound, isn't it? Which is again why you don't want to I'm not going to start ramping in loads of treble because that's not stylistically right.
Yeah.
Other things might need some more treble. This is.
I like what you've done with the top end as well, because it is kind of. I've been doing a lot of Sabbath stuff, and they've gone way back to the earlier sounds, which is smoother, and just the difference between the source and what you're doing to it already.
It's that more vinyl orientated thing. Because obviously those albums were mixed for vinyl because that was the only way they came out. There was no CD version of, was there? So the mix engineer probably was thinking about top end, was thinking about out of phase space and all this kind of business, which these days mix engineers don't give a second thought to because they don't need to.
Yeah.
The problem is then when they come to say, oh right, put that vinyl now. I had to cut the Oasis stuff, and that is a nightmare to cut.
Right.
It was never intended for vinyl.
Yeah,
that's intended for loud, big CDs, and you try and get all of that top end distortion. Because let's face it, is just a massive distortion above about 4 or 5k on that, and it just turns to crap on the I got a reasonable sounding cuts in the end, but it took a long time. It took quite a while to get it right.
Are you working off? What masters are you working off? Are you working off half inches, or are you off?
No, in this situation, it's straight from the 96k masters that were done here from the half inch. So
right, okay,
to be honest, these days it's probably the better way to cut most stuff is digital. I can set up a converter loop between the DA2 and AD2 here at 96k, and I'd challenge you to tell the difference between the output and the end of it and the source going into it if it's say coming from a tape machine or something. It's that good. I mean, on these speakers, I challenge you to tell the difference. So on anything less, you're not going to come.
Yeah, no, I mean,
So if you've got a good capture and you're not limiting it, I think that's what people are more concerned about when they say they want their all analog cuts, is because they don't want limiting involved.
Sure.
Fine, we get that, but it's still damn sight better to do it from the 96.
Absolutely.
If nothing else, we can do it half speed from the 96, a
Yeah.
lot easier,
Yeah.
and that just sounds light years better.
Yeah.
If you've got the option between doing it half speed from 96 or full speed from tape, the half speed from 96 will sound better every time.
Brilliant.
But again, that's budgets as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Try to talk someone into going for half speed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know this album that we quoted you 4 hours to cut? Yeah, it's going to be 7 now, is that alright? Yeah, at book rate, yeah, that's fine, yeah? Some people don't know. Yeah, I say there's nothing majorly wrong with the bass, it's just a little bit much, and that's just like, what's that, 2 dB out of 50? Well, quite a tight cue as well. Right.
That's how I imagined it.
Let's get rid of a bit of that. Again, this is something that only affect cutting.
Yes.
Is the out of phase bass content.
Sure.
Because again, I don't know how much you know about the physics of how a record's cut, but if you've got an awful lot of out of phase, you're affecting how deep or shallow the stylus will go. And if you've got too much there, you can literally cause the stylus to come off the lacquer, and so the groove is then not continuous and no use to anyone.
Right.
So you had there was a bit too much there, just the very low stuff. I have to take that back out. The guitar, the real sub on the guitar.
And that's very much pan left and right shit.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I just need to bring that in, and I'm only at 50 hertz. Will be fine for this. I don't need to go mad on it. You tend to use that more if you're trying to squeeze more onto a disc as well. If you've got a 25-minute side or something like that, and you're trying to cram it on. The more out of phase bass you can get rid of, the better, because that means it's not going to go as deep, which means it doesn't go as wide, which means you can get the grooves packed up tighter, but you just can't start compromising the sound quality. Beyond that, no, wrong one. That's the tone box. It's weird, we use it more as a line-up than anything. Especially there, the drums with it. It's just gloss. It's hard to describe what it does. It's just nice.
Yes.
I always describe it to people as it makes it sound expensive.
Yeah.
And they go, oh yeah, do that. There we go. I mean, for cutting, I'm perfectly happy with that at this stage. Which so you're mixing up, not really had to do much.
Okay, brilliant.
So there you go. Like, bit of tone on there, bit of top end on here, bit of bass out on here.
Yeah.
That's about it. Cool. And the necessary filtering, but that's more vinyl related than anything else.
Great.
Plus that would be another reason to keep it at high sample rate as well. Since it's for cutting, there's no reason to sample rate convert it or cut from 48. Because if you sample rate convert, that's just again degrading the signal end of the stage. Try and cut from as close to the source master as possible every time. If you can, the actual source master. Depends what it is.
Brilliant.
Okay, last person in here left the helium on. Fantastic.
Oh, awesome. That's why we're
Can we be stupid?
Have a guess.
Is that a no?
No, you can if you want. Everyone asks eventually. Any guesses?
What's that?
Why we got it?
Balloons?
Does get used for balloons sometimes, actually.
Dusting off the sharp, the swarf.
Nah, that's just a straight vacuum.
Is it? I've no idea. Is it?
Cooling.
Who is it?
It's cooling the head.
Ah,
See this little pipe here that comes around the side?
yeah.
That's the helium pipe. It just literally blows it straight onto the head to keep it cool. Because we heat it as well. You heat the stylus from the coils at the front there,
Yeah.
and then cool it from the helium.
Right.
The idea is to keep it as steady a temperature as you can, because you don't want any temperature variation in it, because that affects how the cut sounds.
Right. Interesting.
It gets very complicated at that point.
See, the lathes I'm used to, before I got into this, I used to work in machine tools, so the lathes I'm used to
Very different type
used
of
to
lathe.
cut metal heavily.
Made chair legs and things.
That's right, yeah, and the rocket stuff as well, and
Oh, very cool.
RB211 engines for Rolls-Royce.
Crikey.
Yes, I know.
It's a very different kind of lathe.
Well, they do the same thing though, don't they? They're
It
basically
spins.
turning. Yes, exactly.
That's what it is, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, just being able to spin something. So, yeah, I don't know how much do you know about this kind of stuff, about how it works, and how much do you want to know about how it works?
It would be wonderful to get an idea of, well, see it working.
Yeah.
Again, it's for people that haven't seen how vinyl is cut before. You know, it's this process, because vinyl's making a resurgence,
You're not wrong. Yeah, we can't cut it fast enough generally
yeah.
these days.
and that's really, really good. And it's useful to know for people that like how they could maybe prepare better. What we can do for you, and the actual process of seeing it actually happen, and then why you can't play the thing that you're actually about to cut. You know.
Oh, we can play what we're about to
Oh,
cut.
can we?
Well, yeah.
Awesome. So
Well, it depends what it is you're cutting. So I thought that was the end of the song. Then I was going to just try to stop it.
Oh no, they go on for ages.
We've
This
got,
lot.
we've got another loop yet. What was it? I forgot what I was going to say now.
The different
Oh
formats.
yeah,
like-
being able to play it or not. No, well, it's not so much different formats. It's just different uses.
Right.
If you've cut something which is going to the factory to
Yeah.
be plated, pressed, you don't play that.
Yes.
If it's not going to the factory, you can do what you want with it.
Right.
Basically. I mean, we'll do numerous test cuts before we start cutting anyway on an album, because you need to test things. How's this
Sure.
working? How's the top end? How's the bass end? Are we getting too much distortion? How's the level? Etc. Etc. So those acetates, yeah, you play them. I mean, what we cut today, you can take it home, play it to your heart's content. Well, until it wears out anyway.
Yes.
You'll get about a dozen, 20
Right.
plays out of it maybe. But each time the top end will start to will
Yeah.
degrade a little bit more, and again, it depends on things like the weight of your stylus and all that kind of stuff as well, but they usually sound fine. In fact, they'll generally sound better than the press, because obviously it's not gone through the positive,
Yeah.
negative metalwork and all that business. It's just straight off the lathe. It's the best way it can sound, really. Right. Okay. So in theory, I'm not going to have to do anything to this to actually cut it. Ordinarily, at this point, when you've got your CD master coming in, you need to start working out the level we can cut it at.
Yeah.
The filters are going to need to apply to it. The de-essing going to need to do to it. Might still need to do some de-essing as it goes to the lathe,
Yeah.
but that's acceleration limiting on the lathe rather than de-essing, which
Right.
is slightly different. That's more about making sure that your cutter head's not going to cut a right angle groove, which obviously no turntable again would track.
No.
You're going to hit a wall and then just pop out.
Yeah.
But given we did this for this,
Yeah.
kind of already done that,
Yeah.
so it skips quite a few processes. So in theory, yeah, should just top and tail it, and then we should be able to go almost straight to the lathe. Yeah. So from this side, that's really all we need to do is prepare the signal so that we're sending two separate feeds down to the lathe and in the right positions. Obviously, I say when we were mastering it, we had to do certain things to prepare the signal, to make sure it didn't have too many S's in it, to make sure the top end wasn't too bright, to make sure we'd filtered out enough of the low end so we don't just trip the amps out. Where else have we got on this side?
And then you've got the low end monoing, the elliptical thing that takes.
Oh, sorry, yeah, of course, yeah. We need to, again, you'd normally do that on the way to the lathe. We've got a built-in house elliptical equalizer here, and we'd normally just run through that on the way to the lathe.
Right.
But obviously, in this instance, because we were doing a 4 vinyl master, I've done it on the desk, and now I'll bypass that piece of equipment entirely on the way to the lathe.
Cool.
Just don't need to go through it at all. Despite the fact we've done some de-essing, there will still need to be more on the lathe. It will have to. We use the acceleration limiter on the lathe. It's slightly different to S's. It responds to things like sharp transients more. I think really heavy 80s snare drum attacks and that kind of thing. They'll really trip it, because that is the potential. So as I say, to draw a right-angled.
So it's kind of just
groove or
dampening the
something
high
like that.
end.
It's protecting. Yeah,
okay.
it's about protecting the head as well.
Yeah.
Because if you send through too much signal in the wrong time and the wrong way to the head, you can just blow it up.
Yeah.
Back in the day, that wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
Back in the day, you put it in a jiffy bag, send it to Neumann, and a new one comes back a week later. Now, they're like gold dust. In fact, they're probably worth more than their weight in gold now.
Yeah.
So if it blows, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Basically. There's not many people who've got any spares. And the ones who do, they ain't going to let go of them.
No.
And there's not that many people left who know how to repair them either.
Mm.
That's becoming an issue. The people who can repair them are dying off.
Right.
Yeah, we're going to be in Stuck one day.
Yes.
It's getting that way quite soon. It's weird that we've got new presses now for the records in plants that some company in Germany started making. But that's still about the most modern lathe ever produced, and that's about the same age as me.
Wow.
So there's nothing newer than that.
Wow.
There's nothing more reliable than that, and they break down, and they need a lot of TLC to keep them working.
Right.
It's a bit of a problem. So essentially, the signal just comes under the floor into the top of the amp rack from there. And that is again about more signal preparation, really. The top of it here is the acceleration limiter I was telling you about, which will hopefully won't have too much effect on this track because we've dialed most of it out already, but you put it there more for protection than anything else. And then you're sort of moving down into the actual amps which power the head.
Right.
What you're actually doing is these two little black circles under here are speakers, essentially. So those amps are essentially just powering those two little speakers. Those are, I don't know how close you can get in and how well you can see it, but those little speakers essentially have just got little porcelain struts that go down to the stylus mount.
Yeah.
Those vibrate, that shakes the stylus.
Right.
That's it. It's not a complicated or high-tech process. It's not evolved very much since Edison was doing it, really. It's the same principle done in exactly the same way. The only thing we really do that wasn't done then is, like I say, things like feeding it two signals so that it can adjust the amount of space it's using on the disc. But apart from that, it's essentially the same principle.
Yeah.
It's not changed. That's well, the things like our EQ curves have come in as well.
Yeah.
But after the 78s, yeah. In terms of what we can control, there's not a great deal. At this stage, we can control the land and the depth. The land is what they use as the term for the amount of space on the disc.
Yeah.
So the land setting there is how much space the lathe is leaving between each groove.
Yeah.
And you can realistically get down on there to, is that nanometers? I forget all the little abbreviations now for how these things work. Is it nanometers? The little U?
I can't read close up. Micro.
Micrometers, nanometers, one or the other.
Micrometers, yeah.
Yeah, but you end up basically you can get down to about 10 microns between them, and it can maintain that gap.
Yeah.
No matter what gets thrown at it, really. The other thing then is the depth, which is the basic depth that you start at. Obviously, as you start feeding music into it, the depth starts to change because that's the modulation that is actually producing the music, or represents the music, should I say. But we can control the basic depth that you start at, and then it will obviously work deeper or shallower from there. Yeah. You'd want to go generally, if you can go deeper, do it because it gives you more groove wall that's got the information on it. If nothing else, it's probably the best word for it. And the more of the modulation that you've got in the groove, the more sound that you get out of it. Essentially, the better the quality of it. So, not always the case. There comes a point where there's no point in going any deeper, and that kind of thing. And there can come a point where if you go too deep, you will go straight through the lacquer and hit the aluminium disc in the middle. Then you're screwed again, because then you just rip your stylus off.
Right.
Yeah. So there's not a great deal that we actually control here. It's all about it's about delicate balance, really, and you're sort of balancing various controls off against each other. When you're doing something like what we're about to do here, a 12-inch single. There's not really much that you need to worry about at this side, because it's all to do with how the signal sounds then.
Right.
If you're trying to cram in on an album, if you're trying to cram in, say, 25 minutes on a side, which is a lot, then we can start doing things to be able to put more on the disc, like reduce the amount of depth that's being used so that it cuts shallower, reduce the amount of land between, which can increase the risk of an overcut or something like that, where the grooves literally clash over each other. Then you start taking out things like bass, so that things don't go as deep and as wide, and you start doing that kind of stuff. These later Neumanns that we've got here have been modified to have extra fancy controls as well, so that we can try and squeeze more in. The two that are important on here really are the two bottom ones, which is the minimum depth reduction, which essentially is what it sounds like. If a signal comes and it makes the lathe want to dive a certain amount, that will restrain it.
Right.
Essentially, I suppose it's essentially a limiter across the input on it.
Right.
And then the other one is sort of the opposite. The other one is the land economy setting, which essentially controls how quickly it will change its pitch setting. If it's you'll see it when we start cutting the needle at the top that looks a bit like a VU. That basically shows you how quickly the cartridge is moving along at any given point, and it'll sort of look like that most of the time. It's making gentle adjustments to open and contract it. If you start cranking the land economy, it starts looking like a windscreen wiper. It's making adjustments like this, trying to really make the adjustments as quickly as it can when it knows it doesn't need to leave the space, or as quickly as it can when it knows it needs to actually give some, that kind of thing. But again, you try and avoid using those kind of things until you get onto the sides where you're trying to pack stuff in.
At which point your advice would be?
Lose a song.
Exactly.
More often than not, lose a song. Can we edit this one down? Do you really need it like this? Or how about we do it as a double? Or something like that. But again, it usually comes down to costs and all that kind of stuff. I'm trying to think which bits of this will actually be of interest to people. I'm not sure how interesting that bit's going to be to people, really, but
I think in essence you've captured what it's about, and the actual physical process of seeing something done, and how different it is to just bounce to disk a file and send it off.
It's a lot more satisfying than bounce to disk a file.
Absolutely.
And it definitely isn't a push a button watch it go process. No. You've got to know what you're doing with it, or else, if nothing else, you can cause tens of thousands of pounds worth of damage to it.
Yeah.
But if you want to cut to sound good, you need to know how to. It's suppose it's the same as any other piece of equipment, really. If you want to get the most out of a compressor, you need to know how to use it. You want to get the most out of a cutting lathe, you need to know how to use it. The trouble is, there's quite a lot on a cutting lathe. Yeah. there's a lot of it. Alright, so shall we actually cut something then? Shall we actually do this? And just get the. So again, what do you know about the discs themselves?
Nothing.
Tell us.
Feel weight. Again, don't just feel it.
Yeah, it's quite dense, isn't it?
It's metal. It's aluminium. It's an aluminium disc in the middle, and then it's literally just it kind of goes through a screen of the lacquer, liquid lacquer being poured onto it to keep it smooth. The reason for that is because obviously the next stage in the process is the electroplating process, where you need to be able to positively charge the disc to attract the what's the first stage? Copper onto it, I think it is. Is it copper? No, it's silver first, isn't it? I should know these things. I don't work in a pressing plant.
Well, exactly. We'll have to go there.
No, I put it in a box and send it off.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fascinating. I
can imagine.
I went to one in LA last time I was there. Right. It's the first time I'd been to one. And it's just, it's an amazing process. It's my little thing. The high-tech bit to blow the dust off. Some people have got compressed air lines for that. I wish we did. They're not better. Okay, so most of the noise that you can hear is the vacuum.
Yeah.
Obviously, the turntable itself doesn't really make any noise. That makes a little bit. So the vacuum's doing two things. Firstly, it's holding the disc onto the platter. The platter's got little holes across it. You adjust it for the size of the disc. And it holds it tight to the turntable, because you obviously want it to be as flat as possible, and you also don't want it to move, because you don't want it to sort of slide back and forth as you're putting pressure on it, which is obviously what we're doing here. And then the other one is this little tube under the bottom here. which is what you were thinking earlier. It sucks the swarf off the disc as it's being cut, and just goes into that little tank down the bottom.
Right.
And if you've ever held that stuff, it's
horrible.
It's fucking horrible. It just sticks to you, and
It's even worse when it's covered in oil.
Doing this, you can't. Well, no, but we generally put a little bit of washing up liquid in the bottom of it because it helps it all sink. So yeah, it comes out all gooey and horrible, and it sticks to you. And you're like, you're doing this for ages, trying to get it off you, and you itch. And, depending on what the length is, if you're cutting a big album, which is obviously more often than not, your biggest concern is trying to get the thing on. If you're cutting a 12-inch single, it can be quite often making sure it doesn't look stupid. Because you can end up just using like that much, and then you've got masses of run-out groove. Okay. So, I suppose in this instance it obviously doesn't matter. So normally what we do is just run test passes, where you're not cutting, you're just feeding the audio to the lathe, and it'll do its thing as if it was cutting.
Okay. But so there's quite a lot of intelligence in the control system for the lathe.
That thing still blows my head, to be honest.
Yeah.
When I consider that it is like late 70s, early 80s technology, what it's capable of is amazing, really. Yeah. The adjustments that it can make, and say there's no digital chips in there, there's no ICs in there. It's all completely analog. And I say it can make however many, I think it's about 4 changes per revolution to the pitch, based on a signal that's coming into it.
Wow.
And you think, okay, now someone could design that on a single chip and it'd be easy, but
that's
then
brilliant.
It's amazing, really. That what it can cope with and what it understands. Because obviously, in essence, it's just all of these things about like how the pitch will move and how quickly the cartridge is moving across and all that. All of that is essentially guesswork on the part of the lathe, because all you are doing is feeding that signal to the speakers. It's not doing anything to that signal that you're feeding to those speakers, apart from any ACL adjustments that we're making. So it's got to know this is going to take up this amount of space.
Wow.
And I've got no control over it, essentially.
That's brilliant, isn't it?
It is mad that it can do it.
Ah.
Right, so...
Wow.
Right, so we would say... Oh, actually, I do need to check ACL settings before we do a cut down. I'm thinking about it.
Oh, is that... So that's the...
That's the ACL reducing, yeah, so... So you see how it's the snare drums triggering it most of the time. Actually, the guitars are triggering it a lot. I've not seen that before.
Oh, yeah.
So usually brass is terrible for it. Because brass is all sort of top-end raspiness, and it's a nightmare to cut, and it hits the ACLs like nothing else.
Yeah, there's probably quite a lot of high end in the snare as well, and
I say it's not necessarily high end that this is looking for. It's the attack. It's the attack of everything more than anything else. So we want to make sure that we're basically not asking the head to move too quickly.
Is that doing it based on stereo, or is it just looking at the amount of sort of excursions in the whole signal?
Yeah. It's essentially it's a compressor essentially, but it's just tuned very carefully for what it's looking for. It's not just looking for level. It's not just looking for a specific frequency. It's looking for the way something comes in.
Right.
So I say the hi-hats, as you can see now, we can hear them, but it's not doing anything to them.
Yeah.
Because the top end of those is now tamed enough.
Right.
The things that it most often clamps down on is S's in vocals.
Yeah.
And let's say snare drums quite often. But those are the two that you're most often looking for. And I don't know, maybe if you've got like big splashy cymbals, like drummers going mad at the end of a song kind of thing, then it can sometimes start pinging a bit. But yeah, so we're probably kind of okay there. And you can again see now it's actually working. You can see what it will be expecting the depth to do.
Yeah.
But again, that's just its expectation of what it's going to do, because I'm not feeding it any audio through to the head at the moment.
Right. How does it know? It's voodoo.
It doesn't.
It's more.
That's the point. It just carries on doing its thing.
It's amazing.
I mean,
I bet it
if
does.
I hit start now at this point as well, it'll start making the pitch adjustments as well. So you see there at the end, it went wide, then close, and then went back to normal. And that's because you come to the end of the track, which was quite an abrupt end, so it's protecting against you getting print through into the next groove. well, not really print through. In the same way as you would have printed on a tape, it's the same sort of thing. You get an echo in going into the next groove. So you do it at starts and ends of songs. It has to allow extra space to make sure that kind of thing. Again, it does this automatically,
isn't it? You forget about things like that. It was always that thing when you listen to albums. Like, why is there that echo and shit like that?
It wasn't cut on a VMS-80. That's why.
There you go.
It was cut on probably an earlier lathe or something like that. That didn't do it, or the engineer couldn't be bothered to press the button to make it happen. Yeah, I mean but largely this one will do it for itself. It depends what the material is. I was doing that Floyd one, and so Start of Shining Crazy Diamond. Obviously, that guitar chord that comes in, I was telling it to allow extra space, because you can easily do that. We basically just doink, you hit that, bang, it allows a lot of extra space for a few seconds, and then closes back up again. So that again is just going to prevent that any of the lathe isn't catching on its own. But more often than not, if you're going from, let's say, from very low level to high level, or high level to low level, it picks it and it can get it most times. Yeah. It's just that kind of thing. It's just mental, really. So I guess I'm trying to decide whether it's worth doing this or not. Ordinarily, the first thing I'd be doing at this point would be trying to do some sort of test cut, so that I can see how the lathe is actually going to cut it. I've just noticed there is a bit of scrap behind you, so I might grab that and do it. Yeah, so we end up with loads of bits of scrap lying around that you use for this kind of thing all the time. Could be anything on there.
I wonder what's on there.
Yaz.
Oh, that's mine. I know what that is. You don't want to hear it. It wasn't good. Here is the actual current that's going to the head. Yeah.
Right up the top, wasn't it?
Yeah, generally speaking, to try and keep it below half an amp for most stuff. You can go over it for 12-inch stuff, and when you go in louder, but half an amp's a good sort of benchmark.
Right. So you say the top one's controlling vertical and one's controlling width, is it?
No, at this point they're still both left and right.
Oh, okay.
It becomes mid-side at that point if you think about it, because remember you've got your two speakers like that working like that on the actual stylus, so everything's stereo right through to the head essentially. Okay. But yeah, that's starting to look more usable. See, I clearly just left too much in at the actual top end on the master. You see, now the ACL's hardly having anything to do apart from the nasty bits that it needs to actually respond to.
Yeah.
So that's starting to look more like something that's going to be playable. Cool. You can hear it if you want. Sorry. The test is always to listen to the out-of-phase content. That's where distortion shows up a lot earlier on an LP. Because as you alluded to, it's with it being mid-side. The way that works is the mid signal is the lateral movement, the side is the vertical movement. So everything on here is now reacting as if it was actually cutting.
Right.
It just doesn't know that the head's not gone down. So this way, I know exactly how much space it will take up. And again, the great thing about these is when you do these test cuts, you'll do your test pass, and then what you cut takes up exactly that space every time. And then when you need to do another one, it's exactly the same again. And bear in mind, it's obviously doing all the calculation on the fly each time. But then again, you can see the pitch correct movement is here, because this is the lead screw, which actually obviously moves the cartridge along. So you'll see that speeding up and slowing down as the needle is doing its thing. The weird thing is when you first see that stop. anything at 45, you can basically run right into the inside edge of the disc.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're at 33, you ideally want to stay away from the inside edge because the distortion just builds up more. It's less groove per inch going past the head.
It's the surface speed,
the further
isn't it?
in you get. Exactly. It's the same. It's the same principle as tape.
Yeah.
15 ips hasn't got the top end that 30 ips has got. It's the same on this. I think it's somewhere around 9 centimeters a second or 9 inches a second that's passing the head on the outside edge, down to less than half that by the time you get to the inside. So it's just a lot less information that can be put there. Half speed helps with that a bit because it's the top end that suffers the most.
Right.
So at half speed, that awkward 15 kilohertz that you can't get on the inside edge is suddenly 7.5.
Yeah.
That's easy to cut.
Yeah.
So it helps to an extent, but you're still never going to get away from it. They really should have made it so the turntable sped up as the needle moved in.
Yeah, that's what they did. Actually, funnily enough, on the lathes, the
Oh,
computer-controlled
actual
lathes on the machines I used to work on, they had constant surface speed,
Yeah,
which made the cut much smoother.
they really should have done that when they were working on the formats, but I suppose it was just
back then.
yeah.
The engineering would have been a nightmare.
Basically, your distortion starts to build up big time when you get past about 60%.
Yeah.
If you under 60 and you're great, really, and 60 to 80 is pretty fine. It's only really at 33 once you go past 80 that you've got to worry about level and distortion and all that kind of business.
Yeah. And we were at 45.
So yeah, not ridiculous, I suppose. It'll do. Make it a bit wider so it takes up a bit more space.
Oh, good.
It'll do.
I thought wider meant louder, but it doesn't, does it?
No.
No.
Well, again, that'd use up more space as well if you go louder. But then the trouble is, as your level increases, so does your top end, and then for your distortion, etc., etc., etc. I'm actually finding I'm cutting albums quieter at the moment. My album level's going down because you end up with just a nicer sounding cut. And it's not like we're in the volume wars on vinyl like it used to be. It's not like yours has to be louder than the next one in the jukebox because the jukebox doesn't exist anymore. No. So people who are buying vinyl are generally now buying it because it's the good sounding format. So make it sound good rather than make it sound loud.
Vinyl's the only format that will play in years to come.
Again, this is something to do before dropping the needle each time, is literally just clean it. It's a little bit of acetone on the end of the cotton bud, and it just makes sure that there's no lacquer from the previous one or any other bits of dust or whatever caught up around the head, because if anything that's there, if you've got something stuck to the side of the head, that's going to make a score all the way down your groove for the whole record. Seems to me, and that's obviously audible.
Yes.
Because it's a direct representation of the music. So it's just... Okay, so that's just a whole series of basically arming the lathe. It's now ready to go. When it gets to a certain point, the head will now drop. It will do the running groove and wait for music. Or I can push a button to make that happen as and when I'm ready. When it gets to the right point, it's going to drop the head. There. So it's not largely a case of just waiting. It is at this point just a real-time process. It's weird, you do get some people come in and say, so how does the lathe know what to cut? How does it know what music to cut? Yeah, so here you go, you can see we're getting some ACL activity on those hats a little bit and on a few of the S's on the vocal there. And therefore it's keeping the levels around half an amp peak, which means that it'll track on pretty much any turntable. But as you were saying though earlier, that is the weird thing. I could do a whole lot less processing like the ACL work, like the de-essing work.
Yeah.
The lathe could cut it.
Yeah.
The lathe has got no problems with that. But 90% of turntables would just distort when you play it.
Yeah.
Someone who's got the $5,000 turntable, it sounds fantastic. But everyone else who's got a Crossley is going to sound awful.
Anything's going to sound bad on a Crossley.
Yes, there is that. Bane of my life, those things.
And those things chew up your records too, don't they?
Yeah. The stylus weight on them is about 4 or 5 grams. It's insane.
Yeah.
You just gouge out the groove. Actually thinking about that. So at this point, you get to the end of the music and you literally just hit the fast button and it does its run out groove. And then when it gets to the end, it does the lock, and then it'll pop up and move out. There's the lock. Up and out. That's it.